People see an old woman with a floral coin purse and sensible shoes, and they make up their minds. They see slow, they see poor, they see insignificant. The woman in the white pantsuit, tapping her expensive heel on the linoleum behind me in lane 4, was no different. What people like her never understand is that the loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. The left wheel of my shopping cart made a persistent squeaking sound. Squeak, squeak, squeak. It was a familiar, almost comforting noise as I pushed it across the worn linoleum tiles of the everyday mart. The store was too bright. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed, a constant, high-pitched electrical sound that buzzed just under my hearing. It always gave me a slight headache if I stayed too long. Today I was not staying long. My cart was nearly empty. I had a small can of Bartholomew's favorite salmon pâté, a quart of whole milk, and a single perfect yellow rose. The rose was for the small vase on my kitchen windowsill. I liked to see it when I washed the dishes. I passed the bakery. The air was thick with the smell of sugar and yeast from the morning's bread. It mixed with the faint chemical scent of floor cleaner. I steered my squeaking wheel past the rows of magazines, their shiny covers promising new diets and celebrity secrets. I was not interested. I saw the checkout lines ahead. Most were long, filled with people pushing carts piled high with weekend supplies. I scanned for the shortest one. Lane 4 looked manageable. A young man with a red vest and a name tag was scanning items for a man in a construction jacket. I pushed my cart into the line and pulled to a stop. I set the brake with my foot. The squeaking finally stopped. I waited patiently, resting my hands on the cart's handle. The man in the construction jacket paid in cash, counting out crumpled bills. The cashier, Leo his tag read, smiled and thanked him. The man nodded and pushed his cart away. It was my turn. I pushed my cart forward the final few feet and began to unload my items. I picked up the salmon pâté first. I placed it gently on the black conveyor belt. Bartholomew was very particular. Then I lifted the milk, its plastic container cold and smooth in my hand. I set it next to the cat food. Finally, I picked up the rose. Its stem was wrapped in thin, clear plastic. I placed it last, well away from the edge. I reached for my purse. It was a large floral print cloth bag, and I kept it in the child seat of the cart. I was searching for my small coin purse inside when I heard the clatter of another cart hitting the metal divider behind me. I did not turn. I continued to search through my bag. I found my reading glasses, a bundle of tissues, and a loose peppermint. A heavy sigh came from directly behind me. It was not a small, tired sigh. It was a loud, dramatic rush of air, meant to be heard. I ignored it. I finally felt the familiar worn leather of my coin purse at the bottom of the bag. I wrapped my fingers around it. Then came a new sound. Tap, tap, tap. It was a hard, sharp noise on the floor tiles. The sound of an impatient heel. Tap, tap, tap. It stopped, then started again. Faster this time. I pulled the coin purse from my bag, my movements slow and deliberate. I took my time zipping the cloth bag shut. The tapping stopped. A new sound, a quiet huff of air came from the woman. I still had not looked at her. I placed my floral bag back into the cart and turned my attention to Leo, the cashier, who was waiting. He smiled at me. "Just these 3 things today?" "Just these 3, I confirmed. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was right behind me, a demand for speed. I made a point to move even more slowly, reaching into my coin purse for my discount card. "Are you going to be all day?" The voice was sharp and high, cutting through the low hum of the grocery store. My hand stopped moving inside the coin purse. I turned slowly. My neck always appreciated a gentle pace. The woman behind me was a stark contrast to the beige and gray of the store. She wore a white pantsuit. The fabric was thick and looked expensive. Her blonde hair was cut in a severe straight line that stopped at her jaw. Her face was tight, her lips pressed together in a thin, impatient line. She was staring at me. Her eyes were cold. I looked down at her cart. It was overflowing. I saw at least 3 bottles of champagne, the kind with gold foil on top. There were large blocks of cheese wrapped in wax, clear bottles of imported water, and boxes of small fancy crackers. I looked back up at her face. "I do beg your pardon, dear?" I said. My voice was soft. She pointed a long, pale finger, her nail painted a deep red, at my 3 items on the belt. You're holding up the entire line." She glanced behind her, as if to prove her point. The line was, in fact, getting longer. Some of us have actual jobs to get to. We have things to do. I looked at my items. The milk, the cat food, the rose. Then I looked at her. "I am just paying," I said, "at a glacial pace." She snapped. Her voice got louder. I could feel Leo, the cashier, watching us. He looked nervous. He was rubbing his thumb against the side of his scanner. The person behind the woman in white was now looking at their phone, trying very hard not to be involved. The woman took a step closer. The strong, sweet smell of her perfume reached me. It was too much, too flowery. She looked me up and down. Her gaze moved from my gray hair to my old, faded cotton cardigan. She saw the cuff, where the thread was just beginning to fray. She looked down at my sensible, flat-soled shoes. "Just hurry up," she demanded. Her voice dropped, but it was filled with contempt. "Could you possibly move any slower? Or are you just a slow, poor old woman with nowhere to be?" The words hung in the air. The tapping of Leo's scanner stopped completely. The quiet rustling of bags from other lanes seemed to fade. The only sound was the unchanging, high-pitched hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. This was the moment. The public shaming, as she had intended. She wanted me to flush with embarrassment, to fumble with my money, to apologize. I looked at her. I looked at her tight, angry face. I saw her sharp, expensive suit and her cart full of celebration. She seemed very brittle. I felt a small, familiar weariness settle over me. I sighed. It was a genuine sigh. I turned away from her, breaking the eye contact. I looked back at Leo. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "You are quite right," I said. My voice still quiet but clear enough for both of them to hear. The woman behind me made a small, triumphant humph sound. She thought she had won. I kept my back to the woman in white. I gave my full attention to Leo. His face was pale, and he kept looking from me to the woman and back. He had my 3 items lined up by the scanner. "Leo," I said, my voice calm and steady. He met my eyes. "I'd like to pay for my things now." He nodded, relieved. "Yes, ma'am. That'll be $9.42. "Thank you," I said. I looked down at my coin purse, still open in my hand. Then I looked past Leo, at the woman's cart overflowing with champagne and cheese. I looked back at Leo's nervous face. I made a decision. "Actually, Leo," I said. I paused just for a moment. "I'll be paying for her cart, too." The silence that followed was entirely different. It was no longer just awkward. It was heavy with confusion. Leo's mouth opened slightly. "Ma'am?" he whispered. Behind me, the woman in white let out a short, barking laugh. "What did you just say?" I did not turn around. I kept my eyes on Leo. "Are you senile?" The woman's sharp voice continued. "You can't even afford your own cat food. You think you can pay for my groceries?" She laughed again, a sound completely without humor. "My cart is probably worth more than your entire monthly pension." I still did not look at her. Her words were just noise, like the buzzing lights overhead. I kept my gaze on Leo. "Just run it all together, dear," I said. "My items and all of hers." Leo was frozen. He stared at me. He did not know what to do. He clearly did not believe I could do it. I don't know if—" he started. I reached into my worn floral coin purse. I pushed aside the small bundle of quarters. I pushed past my discount card. My fingers found what I was looking for, tucked into a small leather sleeve at the back. It was heavy. It was not plastic. I pulled it out. The store's bright lights did not reflect off its surface. The card was matte black, made of solid anodized titanium. I placed it on the counter, right next to the debit card reader. It did not land with a click like a plastic card. It landed with a solid, heavy thunk. The sound was small, but in the quiet lane, it was absolute. Leo's eyes snapped down to the card. He stared at it. His head tilted. His brain was trying to understand what he was seeing. He saw the American Express name. He saw the embossed, simple name, Elara M. Vance. He looked at me, the little old woman in the faded cardigan. He looked back at the impossible black card sitting on his counter. I heard a sharp intake of breath from behind me. I looked over my shoulder. The woman in white was no longer smirking. Her eyes were fixed on the card. She knew, people like her, who value money above all else, do not just recognize that card. They understand what it signifies. They understand the kind of power that has no need to be loud. Her face, which had been so tight with anger, was now slack. The blood drained from it, leaving her expensive makeup looking like a mask. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Leo's hand hovered over the black card. He looked at me, then at the card, then back at me. He seemed afraid to touch it. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a dry whisper. Are you sure?" "I am quite sure, Leo," I said gently. "Please scan her items, all of them." The woman in white made a small, choking sound. I turned my head to look at her fully. She was frozen. Her expensive suit suddenly looked too stiff, like a costume she could no longer move inside. Her eyes were wide, locked on the small, heavy piece of metal sitting on the counter. The line behind her had grown. I could hear people shifting and murmuring, wondering what the holdup was. The man directly behind the woman, the one who had been staring so intently at his phone, was now watching us. His mouth was slightly open. Leo swallowed, his throat moving. He took a slow breath, as if bracing himself. He picked up his scanner gun. "Okay," he said. He turned to the woman's cart. "Ma'am?" he asked, his voice small. I need you to unload your items." The woman did not move. She just stared, her face chalky. "Ma'am?" Leo repeated a little louder. She flinched as if waking up. She looked at Leo, then at her overflowing cart, as if seeing it for the first time. Her hands, which had been gripping the handle, moved. They were shaking slightly. Mechanically, she reached in and grabbed the first bottle of champagne. She placed it on the belt. The spell was broken. The store sounds rushed back in. The beep of scanners in other lanes, the rumble of carts on the tile. A distant announcement for a cleanup in aisle 3. Beep. The first bottle. Beep. The second bottle. Beep. The third. Leo scanned with a new, focused energy, his movements fast. He seemed to want this to be over as quickly as possible. Beep, beep, beep. The bottles of imported water. The blocks of cheese wrapped in wax. The packages of prosciutto. The boxes of tiny, expensive crackers. The pile of luxury groceries grew at the end of the lane. The woman unloaded her entire cart in complete, stunned silence. Her movements were stiff. The arrogance had evaporated, leaving behind a brittle, visible confusion. She did not look at me. She did not look at Leo. She just stared at the conveyor belt as it carried her items away. Beep, beep, beep. Finally, the cart was empty. The woman stood beside it, her hands hanging limply at her sides. Leo hit a button on his register. The machine whirred, printing the long receipt. He looked at the small screen and his eyes went wide all over again. He looked at me. "Ma'am," he said, his voice cracking. "The total, for everything, it's $814.22, he said the number loudly. Too loudly. The man behind the woman flinched. I heard a quiet wow from the next lane over. The woman in white closed her eyes. Just for a second, as if the number was a physical blow, I simply nodded. "That's fine, Leo." I gestured to the card reader. He seemed to understand. He picked up my Centurion card, holding it carefully by the edges. He looked at the magnetic strip, then at the chip, unsure what to do. "You can just tap it, dear," I said helpfully. "Right there on the screen." "Right. Yes." He fumbled for a moment, then held the heavy card to the reader. The machine beeped. A single, final, authoritative beep. A small green light flashed. The screen read, "Approved." Leo let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a full minute. He carefully placed the card back on the counter in front of me. I picked it up. I felt its familiar weight in my palm. I slipped it back into its small leather sleeve and placed it inside my worn coin purse. I zipped the purse shut. I turned to my 3 items, which were waiting in a small plastic bag at the end of the counter. My milk, my cat food, and my rose. I picked up my single small plastic bag. It was light in my hand. I could feel the cold of the milk container through the thin plastic. Leo, the cashier, was moving like a machine. He grabbed a handful of plastic bags and started bagging the woman's groceries. Crinkle, crinkle, rustle. He put the 3 champagne bottles in a bag first. The glass clinked together. Then he started on the cheeses, the crackers, the imported water. He did not look at me. He did not look at the woman. He just focused on the mountain of items, his face still pale. I turned from the counter. My path was slightly blocked by the woman in white, who was still standing next to her now empty cart. She had not moved. Her arms were stiff at her sides. Her head was down, and she seemed to be staring at my floral coin purse, which was now zipped shut and resting in the child seat of my cart. Her breathing was shallow. I could see her shoulders rise and fall in tiny, sharp movements. The silence from her was total. The rest of the store, however, was no longer quiet. The people in line behind her were not pretending to look at their phones anymore. They were all watching. A man in a blue work shirt, a young mother holding a toddler, an older gentleman leaning on a cane. They were not whispering. They were just staring, openly, but they were not staring at me. They were all looking at the woman in the white suit. Their faces were not angry. They were not sympathetic either. They were just watching her be silent. Leo kept bagging. Rustle, crinkle, beep as he had to recheck a price. He filled 1 bag, then 2, then 3. The pile of bagged groceries at the end of the counter grew larger and larger. It was an absurd amount of food. I pushed my cart forward. The left wheel started its noise again. Squeak, squeak, squeak. I had to pass directly by the woman to leave the lane. I stopped right beside her. I was so close I could smell her expensive, flowery perfume again. It was still too strong. She flinched when my cart squeaked to a halt next to her. Her whole body tensed, her shoulders pulling up toward her ears. But she did not look at me. She kept her eyes fixed on the floor, on the worn, dirty tile. This was the moment. She had wanted everyone to see me, the slow, poor old woman. Now everyone was seeing her. I leaned in, just a little. I did not raise my voice. I spoke in the same soft tone I had used before. I spoke just for her. "Don't you worry, dear," I whispered. She squeezed her eyes shut. I patted her arm. Her suit jacket was stiff and coarse under my hand, not soft at all. She flinched at my touch, pulling her arm away as if it had been burned. There's plenty more where that came from. I did not wait for a response. I did not want one. I took my hand off her arm. I straightened up. My business here was finished. I gripped the plastic handle of my cart. I pushed. Squeak, squeak, squeak. The sound was loud in the suddenly quiet space around lane 4. I did not look back at the woman in white. I did not need to. I pushed my cart forward, my eyes on the sliding glass doors at the far end of the store. I walked past the man who had been behind her. He was pulling his own cart forward, his items bumping into the divider. He did not look at me. He was watching the woman in white as he began to unload his own groceries. I passed the young mother holding her toddler. The little boy in her arms was the only one watching me. He had wide, curious eyes and a sticky-looking face. He pointed a small finger at me. His mother quickly and quietly pulled his hand down, her face flushed. I kept walking. The floor was smooth under my wheels, except for the one bad one. Squeak, squeak, squeak. I passed lane 5. The cashier was laughing with a customer about a coupon. I passed lane 6. A bagger was carefully separating eggs into a paper bag. The sounds were normal. The buzzing, beeping, ordinary life of the everyday mart was all around me, unaffected. It was strange. It felt as if I had just stepped out of a small, silent bubble of tension. My cart rumbled over the metal grate that separated the main store from the entrance. The sound was loud. Clack, 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 clack. I stopped just before the automatic doors. My floral bag was in the child seat. My single small plastic bag was next to it. The yellow rose poked its head out of the top. I paused. I did not want to, but I did. I turned and looked back. From this distance, lane 4 was just a number above a light. I could see the woman's white suit. She was no longer frozen. She was moving, but her movements were jerky, mechanical. She was putting the bags Leo had packed into her own cart, one by one. Her head was down. She did not look up. Leo had already turned his red light on. He was closing his lane. He was wiping down his counter with a cloth, his movements fast and angry, his back to the store. He was done. The line that had been behind the woman was gone, scattered to other registers. She was alone in the lane, surrounded by an enormous pile of her own things, now paid for by a stranger. I turned back to the doors. I had seen enough. I pushed my cart forward. The doors sensed my approach and slid open with a quiet whoosh. The air from outside rushed in. It smelled like hot pavement and car exhaust, a dry, dusty smell that was a sharp change from the cold, clean air of the store. I pushed my cart out onto the sidewalk. The concrete was rougher than the store tile. The squeaking wheel became louder. The parking lot was bright. The afternoon sun was strong, and I squinted as I looked for my car. I walked past the blue and white handicapped spaces. I passed the customer pickup spots. My car was not parked near the front. I never parked near the front. I pushed my cart down the row, the wheels rattling over the small bumps in the asphalt. A large red truck with loud music playing roared past me. Making me stop for a moment, I continued on. Squeak, squeak, squeak. I walked past a silver minivan, a dented blue sedan, and a row of empty spaces. There it was, my car. It was an older model, a beige sedan. It was almost 20 years old, but the paint was clean. The hubcaps were all present. It was in perfect condition. I had it washed every Saturday. I stopped the cart and set the brake with my foot. The squeaking stopped. I opened the trunk. The inside was spotless, with a clean gray carpet liner. I picked up my single bag, the milk, the cat food, the rose. I placed it carefully in the center of the trunk. I turned and pushed the cart toward the nearby return stall. I slid it in. It hit the other carts with a small clang. I walked back to my car. I pulled my keys from my cardigan pocket. I pressed the button. The locks made a quiet thunk. I opened the driver's side door, slid into the familiar cloth seat, and closed the door. The sound of the door shutting was solid. Inside, the car was warm from the sun. But it was quiet. The hum of the store, the squeak of the wheel, the sharp, angry voice, all of it was gone. It was just silence. I put the key into the ignition. The old beige sedan started instantly. The engine was a low, smooth hum, a sound I had known for years. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the space. I drove slowly, my hands resting lightly on the wheel. I navigated the rows of parked cars, following the black asphalt toward the exit. I did not see the woman in white. I did not see her car. I stopped at the edge of the parking lot, signaled, and waited for a gap in traffic. A bus went by, letting out a hiss of air brakes. Then it was clear. I pulled out onto the main road. I passed the gas station, the hardware store, the strip mall with the pizza place. I drove for 10 minutes, leaving the commercial part of town behind. The buildings gave way to smaller houses with neat lawns. Then I turned off the main road. The new road was smaller, with no painted lines. Old trees grew on either side, their branches hanging low over the pavement. After a few hundred yards, the pavement ended, and the road turned to smooth, packed gravel. I came to a high stone wall. It was old, covered in dark green ivy. It looked like it had been there for 100 years. There was no name on it. There was only a heavy black iron gate. I clicked a small remote I kept on my sun visor. There was no sound, no grinding of gears. The heavy gate simply swung inward, smoothly and silently, opening a path. I drove the beige sedan through. The gates slid closed behind me with a quiet, solid thunk. The driveway was long. The gravel crunched under my tires. Crunch, crunch, crunch! It was the only sound. Old, tall trees lined the drive on both sides, and I drove under their shade. The house came into view. It was not new. It was made of solid gray stone, 2 stories high, with a dark slate roof. It was large, but it was quiet. It seemed to be part of the landscape, not an intrusion on it. I parked the sedan on the gravel pad by the side door. The main garage was separate, hidden behind a row of hedges. I got out, the car door closing with a solid, heavy sound. I walked to the trunk and retrieved my single plastic bag. I walked to the side door, a heavy, dark green painted wood. My key slid into the old brass lock. Click! I stepped inside. The air in the house was cool and still. The floor in the entryway was made of dark, polished stone. The sounds of the outside world, the gravel, the road, the world, stopped completely. It was utterly silent. Then, a meow. Bartholomew appeared from the hallway. He was a large, sleek black cat, and he walked silently to me and began to wind himself around my ankles, his tail high. "Hello, Bartholomew," I said. My voice sounded loud in the stillness. "I have your salmon." I walked to the kitchen. It was a large room. The counters were a single long piece of cool gray marble. The cabinets were dark, polished wood. I placed my bag on the counter. I took out the can of salmon pâté. I pulled the tab. The top came off with a small pop. I took a simple ceramic dish from a drawer and spooned the food into it. Bartholomew was already waiting by my feet. I placed the dish on the floor. He began to eat, his small, rough tongue making quiet, lap-lap lapping sounds. I took the quart of milk and opened the refrigerator. It was built into the wall, covered by the same dark wood as the cabinets. It made no noise at all. I placed the milk inside. Finally, I took the yellow rose. I untwisted the plastic wrapper and slid it off. I took a small crystal vase from a high cabinet. I filled it with water from the tap, the stream of water, the only noise in the room. I placed the rose in the vase. I carried the vase to the large window over the kitchen sink. The windowsill was deep. I placed the vase in the center, just as I had planned. The window looked out over a vast, private garden. There were no other houses. There were no other people. Just green grass and trees and the old stone wall in the far, far distance. I stood for a long moment, just looking at the rose against the green of the garden. Bartholomew, finished with his meal, came and rubbed his head against my leg. I reached down and stroked his long, black, soft fur. The house was quiet. My heart was calm. The grocery store, the noise, the woman in the white suit, it all felt very small and very far away. I was home.